Yo, what's up, Speaker Kid 8 here, and today I'm going to be talking about why I became a programmer. Now, for those who don't understand what I'm talking about, I am talking about coding. You know, like making programs, making games, anything that requires code. So what I have here is a USB stick. Now, why am I mentioning this? I'm pretty sure I mentioned this in a previous video ages and ages ago. Why am I mentioning this? Well, because this particular USB stick is full of games that I've made and also programs that I've made. But of course that doesn't answer the question of why I became a programmer, which is literally the name of this video. Well then allow me to explain. So obviously, as a lot of you know, my first ever game or any sort of coding stuff was of course Cave of the Dead, or rather it was Cave Explorer version 1 technically. Okay, so a little update to this section. Fun fact, when I say Cave Explorer version 1, believe it or not, like I thought for the longest time Cave Explorer version 1, in other words, the original version of Cave of the Dead, I thought it was lost for the longest fucking time. Turns out, however, I somehow, well, as I was cleaning up, somehow found a disc. I also found the Legend of Zelda Sword of Destiny one as well. Legend of Zelda Sword of Destiny is my Legend of Zelda fan game, if you don't know. Actually no, there was 3 for some reason of Sword of Destiny. In fact, I know exactly why. I remember because I kept re-editing them because there was like a big mistake that I found at the last minute, and then I was like, oh shit, do it again. And a friend of mine at an old school just wanted a copy of it for some reason. So essentially I found a disc that was just labelled Cave of the Dead, and I think it was actually labelled Cave Game or something like that. So I think it was like Cave Maker. I think that's actually what it was labelled as, Cave Maker. I don't know why. It wasn't just the final version, but also included 2 prototype versions. That's right, prototype versions. I mean, the only difference between the 2 is that the newer one has a clearly unfinished boss fight. You can't like beat the boss, it just bounces around and you can't escape, you can't beat it, whatever. Now, I've always been into like making stories. Now, for the longest time I never knew you could actually make your own games with like an engine, because I thought that was just, oh, you need to be a professional, and then I was introduced to Game Maker and that changed altogether. But for the longest time I would always play games like 3D Creation Station, which is barely even a game because it's like, it's more like a movie maker kind of thing, because it's like barely even a game. And also the Mario and Donkey Kong, or Mario vs Donkey Kong games. I also played Mario and Donkey Kong. You know, games with level editors. So what I would essentially do with them is I would make a bunch of my own levels, and then in my own headcanon I would essentially make my own game. Even though it was built on top of another game, I didn't make any of the code, I didn't make any of the assets, I simply just placed blocks down. And for the longest time, again, I thought that was as far as I could go with making my own games, quote unquote. In fact, for the longest time, when I was very young, for some reason what I would do is I would get a bunch of my games, like DS games, and for some reason have like an interconnected story, even if the games were completely different. But essentially what I would do is I would play one game and then I would have like in my own headcanon, oh, well, there's a villain mastermind behind the scenes controlling the main villain. Oh, and now they've run off to another game, so I have to go and chase after them. Yeah, I was a weird person, and in fact I still fucking am. But now back to the actual question of the video. Why did I become a programmer? Well, as I've already stated, I've always loved writing stories. So when I first came across Game Maker, I thought, wow, this is an excellent way to tell my story in a way that doesn't involve keeping it in here and just using existing mediums to loosely tell a story. But the thing is, there's more to programming than just making games. Now imagine for a moment there's something on your computer that you want to, I don't know, you want to mass change a file name, or you want, or like a file extension, and you look everywhere for a program, and for some fucking reason, nobody has thought to make a program. I mean, there probably is, but let's just use this as an example, okay? It's just an example. But there are other times when you just want a small little program for some arbitrary reason. It might not even go public. There are so many programs that I've made just for myself that admittedly have made my life a whole lot easier, but I have never ever released them to the public and have no intention of releasing to the public. Or in some cases I do. Like for example, Simple M3U Maker. Now making an M3U file is ridiculously easy, and by the way I'm actually planning on making a GUI version for this. But again, making an M3U file is ridiculously easy. All you need to do is just take the name of a file and then just drop it into a text file. You don't need to add any weird scripting, you don't need to add start blah blah blah. You just drop the file in and then run it in something that supports an M3U file. But of course, even something as simple as that is either too difficult for someone to understand or tedious, because someone might know how to do it, but let's just say for example I'm wanting to make an M3U file of all of my music. Problem is I've got about 500 songs in my music folder, so I decided to make Simple M3U Maker. It was easy to do for the most part, so I just made a small program that made an M3U file. And the thing is, M3U files are more than just music files. You can also use them in certain emulators when it comes to disk files. Say, play like Final Fantasy VII. Let's say Final Fantasy VII as an example. Now, if you download a ISO file, or ROM, or whatever you want to call it, of Final Fantasy VII for the PS1, you will see something like this. You might be thinking to yourself, oh, okay then, I'll just run the first bin file. No, that's not what you do. Essentially what a Q file is, it's a more advanced version of an M3U because it actually runs like all of the tracks at once. So as a TLDR, because I know I've been ranting for a long time, the reason that I became a programmer was because of convenience. That sounds wrong. What I mean by that is I like having workarounds. Like, I'm the kind of person who likes workarounds. Like, let's say for example you've downloaded a game. The problem is there is no .exe file and it requires like something else, like say a Flash game for example. You can't exactly just download a Flash game and just run it. You need an external program. And also due to the fact that Flash acts really weird for some reason, I don't know why, like I really wish there was just like a properly portable emulator that's like when you run it, it just like adds the sol files, which is the save files, into the game's directory rather than in a really long folder. Because the problem with Flash is when you save a game, unless of course the developers themselves have specifically stated exactly where to save them, they'll usually save into, let's say for example you have your Flash game that you're running in say 3 directories deep in your downloads folder. Let's also say for example that you have just looked for your save and you've looked in, well of course it'll be in your updater folder, then you look in Macromedia, then you look in that folder, then you look in that folder, then you look in that folder, and then you'll probably see like game.swf or something. Then you'll find your save files. So essentially what I did was I just made a small little program that simply uses 7-zip. It uses 7-zip reduced rather to simply extract a file which contains both the Flash file and the Flash player projector into a temporary directory. This video is probably going to be like 20 minutes long. So anyway, I've been your host PikaKidNetHate. This has been PikaKidNetHate Chat, and you have been fantastic. So until the next video, I say bye bye.